Dzień dobry. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon, rather. My name is Joanna Barnaś. I am head of the Investor Relations Department at Grupa Azoty, and I have the pleasure of welcoming you at today's conference, both you who are the attendees at today's conference and also all our internet viewers. The Grupa Azoty companies have published their results for the Q1 of 2017, and also we have published a strategy, the new strategy for Grupa Azoty Group. Today's meeting will be headed by Mr. Wojciech Wardacki, the CEO, President of the Management Board, and also Mr. Wojciech Łapiński, Mr. Włodzimierz Sacki, the President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Police, Mr. Krzysztof Omenda, Vice President of Grupa Azoty Puławy, and Mr. Leszek Jakubów, CFO of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn, and Mr. Adam Żurek, Corporate Director for Strategy and Development. I give the floor over to the President of the Management Board. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, at today's meeting, which closes Q1 of 2017 and at which we'll present the performance of the Grupa Azoty Group. This is a great pleasure for me to have you here because due to the bad weather and very controversial events that are taking place simultaneously as we speak all around Poland. You have chosen our meeting and our conference, for which I'm very thankful to you. But moving on to the concrete matters, because this is what we are here for, I would like you to know about the main events and milestones for the Grupa Azoty Group in the recent period, the process of changes and developments, and the reconstruction of the organizational structure of Grupa Azoty and the group of the Grupa Azoty Group is in progress. At one point in time, we need to put more focus and concentrate more on other matters as well. And we believe that this recent period, Q1, is the time when we will move on from declarations of intent to very concrete measures taken at the corporate level. To put it in more concrete way, we are talking about the process of integration and of the organization and processes across the group. The group's performance for Q1 is very positive, and indirectly it was due to the measures that we have taken before in order to strengthen and tighten the integration of the process and organization in the group. We want to talk about the Azoty Group as a uniform business entity that leverages and taps the opportunities which arise across the group from all other companies in the group, which also ensures added value to the entire group as a whole, but also to individual companies due to the integration process. We are talking about synergies and we're talking about the integration effects in very measurable economic terms and financial terms. Those integration processes take place at a number of levels. At the very basic level, we're talking about the integration of processes and the systems of management. This is what has been going on for some time. A much more difficult thing is to change the mentality, the approach from the very verbal communication that the integration is needed, moving on to very concrete measures to be taken in order to reach that integration in fact and in reality, which will drive us towards full integration. And the measures that we put special focus on and have put special focus on in the last months include integration in terms of trade, logistics, purchasing and finance. In terms of the mentality I have mentioned, in terms of the way we look at companies, not as individual entities, but as members of the group, the trade area was the most important area for us. And you saw yourself that sometimes our group entities speak with their own words, in their own words and with their own voice, not as members of the group. And this proved to be controversial in view of the integration process that is going on in the group. To make sure that this does not happen in the future, we do not want to drive integration by imposing an obligation on anybody and on any member of the group. We need to be sure that all management boards across the group and all employees across the group do know and are aware of the fact that this is an inevitable step for them as members of the group. For this reason, and to this end, we are using the opinion-making body, which is the council of the group, and univocally, the management boards of all group companies decided and voted for full integration in terms of the trade and also in other areas across the group. Therefore, I can say that we are moving on to implementation stage from the purely declarative stage, and we have all management boards of the group companies on our side to that end. To make sure that this integration is possible and is sensible, we need to diversify our revenue sources. Looking at our products, we are aware of the fact that we are very vulnerable to business cycles, and this does not apply to Grupa Azoty group only, but also to our direct competitors in that very segment of the economy, sector of the economy. Therefore, we need to have safety cushions, we need to have safety margins, and create and make sure that we have diversified sources of revenue. This is possible only with large investment and capex projects. This is something we are focusing on. The PDH project at Police is one of the highlights of this process. This project was a number of competitive measures were taken to stop or curb this project, but we know now that this was a failure on their side. They are not able to stop that project, no matter what they do. But this is a fact. Our competitors tried to stop us from extending our product chain. Mr. Andrzej Jawiński, the president of the management board of PDH Polska, is present today, is here today with us, and you will have an opportunity to ask him the questions that you have about this very project. This is a person who is fully that has full competence in order to give answers to those questions. In addition, we were focusing also on the integration of our procurement policy, both in terms of our strategic purchases to make sure that we leverage the effect of scale as a group. Oftentimes, it happened that our group companies were minor purchasers, minor buyers of certain raw materials, while others were large-scale buyers. Therefore, not all members of the group were able to leverage those synergies and the scale effect. And in the recent times, we signed a number of major contracts, especially with PGNiG for the purchase of natural gas, and this applies to a number of other areas as well. Only 2 days ago, we signed a major contract for the supply of phosphate rock from the major supplier, the company under the name OCP, and this integration is also something that we were able to see how the product chain for phosphate rock looks like in closer view. There's one thing I need to say. Grupa Azoty has had no integrated purchasing platform before. This is something I'm not very proud of, but I have to say it. And very minor purchases would generate enormous costs. This is something we want to get rid of. We are introducing a purchasing platform, an integrated procurement platform, in other words, so that we are sure that our products are purchased in a cost-effective manner and also in a very transparent manner. Oftentimes, it does happen that the tenders, the public procurement tenders, or the tendering process in general, is a very complicated process, and this we want to avoid as well. There is a major problem matter as well. I want to discuss are the new solutions, such as startups and support for modern day farmers. You do know that we are working in this area as well with the involvement of the president of Poland and also other entities. The procedures were also developed in order to identify and track new ideas, new startups. We do not want to follow the footsteps in the footsteps of certain other big players, such as the players of the mobile communication market, which is an example of how a large player can fail, even though its position was apparently positive. We do not want to follow into the footsteps. We want to be one step ahead. We want to present certain solutions, state-of-the-art modern solutions to farmers, such as, for instance, analysis of pathogens. If a plant is of bad quality, then the farmer oftentimes blames the supplier of fertilizers. We do not want to be in that position. We want to make sure that all plants grow perfectly with the application of our fertilizers. This is something we are supporting as well. In terms of the update of our strategy, the strategy of Grupa Azoty for 2013-2020 was developed some time ago. However, the market has changed. We needed to respond very flexibly to those developments. Therefore, we updated that strategy, the strategy for the period 2013-2020. We dropped certain ideas. We introduced several other in their stead. We will discuss this in the later part of this conference. But in the nutshell, we are doing our best to integrate our functions and processes, diversify our sources of revenue, and also ensure security and safety in general of our group as a whole. To that end, we need to build a base of very solid and reliable suppliers, as well as a base of reliable customers, because this is the area which we have lost the most, especially in the fertilizer segment in the past 3 years, especially for the NPK, for fertilizers in the internal market. Through our channels, the relationships with our distributors are being rebuilt right now, and we're working very intensively to that end. And I do believe that in the short term, I will be able to give you a crystal clear message that we have been successful in that area, so that you to know that our cost position also will improve in the future. In a nutshell, again, I'd like to mention that our products, the Grupa Azoty Group's products, are applied all around the world. This is shown on the next slide. This is something obvious. I do not want to dwell on that. However, there's one matter I'd like to discuss in more detail: the structure of our revenue. 88 or nearly 90%, so to speak, is sold in the European Union and in the internal market. This is especially visible if we're talking about internal market. This is especially important. If there are any incidental windfall opportunities around the world, such as those that happened in 2015 in Venezuela, in terms of the sales of NPKs, but that was a one-off event, a windfall event. As a result of those measures, as a result of those, because of focusing on that particular market, we have lost a lot in terms of our internal market. The internal market is of key importance to us because it means lower logistics costs. It is a very stable and well-known market. This is the market that we should be focusing on first of all. Obviously, in terms of the diversification process, we want to reach and expand to other parts of the world as well. We want to build our position in other parts of the world as well. However, we will definitely be focusing on our internal market. In terms of the investments, we have had 3 major investments in Q1, and mechanical granulation unit at Tarnów, which was successfully brought on, and as well as the new CHP plant at Kędzierzyn, which was successfully brought on stream. In terms of part 1 of this project, the emissions are under control right now, and I believe that the nests of peregrine falcons will be visible soon at in this location. And also the ammonia unit at Police. We have introduced a number of energy efficiency solutions to drive down the failure rate, to drive down the emission rates as well. We will be able to leverage the very good location, favorable location of Police to send our products to our customers. We'll discuss this in more detail. It will be discussed by Mr. Łapiński in just a second. In terms of our capex for 2016, the first quarter of 2017, the first quarter, 1.3 billion is the target, and we have spent more than 200 million in Q1. I know that it took me quite some time to introduce all those matters to you, but now I'll give the floor over to Mr. Wojciech Łapiński, who will present the performance of Grupa Azoty for the first quarter of 2017. As you might know already, our results are better than the estimates presented by analysts. In Q1 2017, revenue from sales, the group's revenue from sales, reached one of the highest ever levels, more than up to 100 million PLN quarter-on-quarter. EBITDA was at 448 million PLN, double the performance from the last quarter, and a slightly higher year-on-year. As a result, our net result was at 254 million PLN, much higher than in Q4 2016. In the period under review, we have seen very favorable trends in the plastics segment. Year-on-year, this segment contributed 79 million PLN to our EBITDA. Another positive contribution was from the chemical segment, which brought 12 million PLN additionally to EBITDA. The situation in fertilizers is slightly worse, which is due to the very complicated and challenging situation around the world. I will now move on to discussing segment by segment. I will start with the sales structure. 57% of sales were directed to fertilizers market, 26% to the chemicals market, and plastics at 12%. In Q1 2017, this is the result for the last quarter of 2016. In Q1 2017, the situation was comparable with slight differences. I'll now move on to discussing segments individually. I'll start with agro fertilizers and the description of the global market in terms of the agricultural products and fertilizers. As you know, we are witnessing, and we have been witnessing, strong price fluctuations in recent periods. This is due to certain trends, both in natural gas and also in the gas of products, agricultural products. Natural gas prices are the main contributors to the price of fertilizers, and also the structure of our customers is a very important factor. We have an oversupply of grains. The price of grains remain at very low levels, except for oil seeds. However, the sentiment among farmers and our consumers is rather positive. Farmers expect that their performance, their work, will be much better than in past years. This is a good signal to our sales force and our sales results, because those sentiments are likely to translate into good sales performance. In terms of the forecast for fertilizer prices, they are still lower than in last years. As you can see, those differences are quite big. This is mainly due to the changes in natural gas prices, which is the benchmark for fertilizer prices. This has a major effect on the fertilizer prices both in Poland and around the world, and obviously in Europe. In terms of margin per nitrogen, in first quarter of 2017, the demand for our product was comparable to the corresponding period in 2016. The situation in Western Europe was similar to the situation in Poland. You can see in the lower part of this slide those major price fluctuations I have mentioned for urea, for ammonia, and for NPKs. Especially in terms of NPKs, this is a different situation. You can see that those price fluctuations are lower. On the next slide, you can see another factor which influences our performance. This is a slide that shows the import of fertilizers to Poland. For the past 3 years, especially in terms of urea, the imports went up 10% last year. And also the supply side the supply comes from NPKs as well. And this has a major effect, a major bearing on our prices. A positive change was observed for calcium ammonium nitrate and for ammonium nitrate. As a result, our fertilizer segment the revenue was at 1.3 billion PLN, which was comparable year on year. Our EBITDA in this segment was at 261 million PLN, down versus the previous corresponding period. The EBITDA margin was quite high at 17%. The situation in the chemical segment, this is something we'll be focusing on right now. It is way more stable compared to fertilizers. We are still benefiting from the very good situation in the titanium white and melamine market. We will discuss these later on as well. The price of those products are rising due to the rising demand. The oxo alcohols, and plasticizers as well, are the areas in which we are performing very well. As a result, our chemicals segment fared well in quarter one. The revenues from sale went up by 21% to 647 million PLN, especially in terms of oxo products and plasticizers, 42% and 33% respectively. EBITDA of the segment went up by 14% to 79 million PLN. The volumes of sales for all product groups were higher than in the corresponding period of 2016. There is an even better situation in terms of our other products. There is a good revival. There are good revival signs in terms of caprolactam, for instance. The benchmark prices for the entire polyamide chain went up by a couple of percent, several percent, within only 1 quarter, starting from phenol and benzene and up to phenol, polyamide and compound products. As a result, our plastics segment fared very well. Record-breaking results. We had record-breaking results in the past couple of years. As you can see, our EBITDA margin was negative in 2015 and 16. This year, in Q1, our performance in terms of revenue was double the performance year on year. We had very good results. So starting from a negative EBITDA, we went up to 66 million PLN in EBITDA at the EBITDA margin of 16%. It is worth emphasizing at this point that despite the increase in prices, we are witnessing a very good level of demand, and this translates into very good levels of sales volumes. A couple of words about the group's financial situation. This is something we can discuss with satisfaction as well. Our net debt is at a very safe level, and our financial leverage as well. The entire group is on the safe side in terms of the financing sources. We are ready to take up new challenges. We have free financing sources of 1.4 billion PLN. Thank you for your attention, and now I'll give the floor over to the President of the Management Board of Grupa Azoty Puławy, Mr. Krzysztof Homenda. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with a reminder of our last year's meeting. I remember that when discussing with you our financial situation last year, you voiced your concerns of whether or not we will be able to reverse the very negative trends of the fertilizer market. And I'm very satisfied and happy to tell you that indeed our performance, which we are discussing today, recorded by the Grupa Azoty Puławy Group, is very good. The first quarter, which in terms of our revenue is better year on year, is definitely something we should be proud of. Obviously, our revenues from sales were much higher quarter on quarter as well, exceeding 1 billion PLN. Of course, a question arises at this point, why and what was the reason to see lower operating result and net result year on year? My answer is that in addition to the write-off we will be discussing which was recognized at the end of Q1, which was an impairment loss write-off after the closure of the unit at Puławy. We had also a situation with higher prices of raw materials, or basic raw materials and feedstocks in Q1 in comparison with the corresponding period last year. The price of gas was higher by more than 30% year on year, and the price of benzene, which is a major feedstock as well, considering the higher sales of caprolactam, went up by nearly 50% year on year. These were the two main reasons due to which our performance in terms of the operating result and net result was lower. However, our EBITDA and our margins are still satisfactory, and I'm very happy to tell you that today. In terms of the contribution segment by segment, as I said before, and as you already know, the fertilizer segment was shaped by the overall market trends and global market trends, and the contribution of the fertilizer segment at Grupa Azotowa Puławy is lower. However, in terms of volume, we practically were able to keep or maintain our market share. Therefore, we know that the pressures in terms of the cost side and the price side is enormous, but we still managed to keep our volumes and keep our market shares. On the other hand, the second segment, the second major segment of our business, the chemicals segment, fared very well, exceptionally well, and the contribution of that segment to EBITDA in the first quarter of 2017 was more than 50 million PLN than in the corresponding period in quarter 1 2016, despite a very challenging situation in the raw materials markets. In terms of the energy segment, the contribution was down 14 million PLN, which was, as I said, mainly due to the impairment loss after the closure of the CHP plant project. In terms of the structure of our sales at Grupa Azoty Puławy Group versus last quarter of 2016, the brightest star in this respect is the chemicals segment, whose share went up from 33 to 36%, at the expense of the fertilizers segment, whose share went down by 2 percentage points quarter on quarter. However, in general, those differences are not major in terms of their bearing on the very structure of sales. The most important thing is to know that the chemicals segment performed very well in quarter 1 of this year. In terms of fertilizers, in the first quarter, we saw lower revenues from sales, as I said, due to the situation in the overall global fertilizer market. However, we need to emphasize that the margin which was reported for the quarter 1 2017 stayed more or less flat on the past year, on the first quarter of the past year. And in terms of volumes, as well as our market shares, this is very important. We should also emphasize the fact that the second pillar, our chemicals segment at the Grupa Azoty, fared exceptionally well. In comparison with the corresponding period of 2016, the revenues of that segment went up by almost 45%. So this is a great success, or at least it is very satisfactory for us. The factors which contributed to that success included better revenues in terms of the sales of caprolactam. It was practically 100% higher year on year, and also in the area of melamine, which is of great importance to us because the situation in the market of melamine is stable, and we do believe and we can assume that it will remain stable in the coming quarters and in coming months. The same applies to urea. The EBITDA margin in that segment is also at a very good level at 25%, and it is significantly higher on 2016 and also on 2015. You can see that this particular ratio went up significantly despite those turbulences, those price fluctuations and variability of prices, especially in terms of natural gas and benzene, which have a great effect on our caprolactam prices. All in all, our financial situation remains invariably stable, with slight variations in terms of profitability, which are due to lower operating profit in 2016 compared to the record-breaking year of 2015, in which we benefited from a certain economic upturn in the market of fertilizers, especially. Therefore, those slight variations should not raise your concerns. In terms of liquidity, our company, our group, is fully secure, and I do believe that many of our competitors wish to see such ratios, liquidity ratios. In terms of our financing structure and investments, financing of investments, we are also on the very safe side. This would be all in terms of my contribution to this presentation. Mr. Włodzimierz Zasadzki, the president of the management board of Grupa Azoty, will now take over. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. In terms of our performance of Grupa Azoty, our performance was also very positive, which was mainly on the back of the market conditions, which were discussed by my colleagues. And on the other hand, the structure of our production and sales was a major factor. Let me remind you that 85% of our production and sales are fertilizers, including compound fertilizers, and despite of the certain decline in their prices and an increase in the price of natural gas, which obviously is the main cost, our performance is still above market expectations. Our revenues from sale reached nearly 700 million PLN, higher year on year, which was mainly on the back of our concern about the domestic market and the revival of this market. Our natural customer is the agricultural segment. However, I'd like to mention that we have had certain negotiations and we signed an agreement with the, for instance, customers such as an association, football association of the Zachodniopomorskie province, of the West Pomeranian province in English, and we will provide our products to football fields, to football pitches. We have a number, tens and dozens, thousands of such clients. So this is not just a minor client. Maybe it is of minor importance in terms of an entire business. However, it has a major bearing on our image in terms of our marketing side. In terms of EBITDA and our net profit, our performance is above market expectations. In terms of segment performance, we have a challenging situation on the market, and obviously our fertilizer segment had a negative contribution to our overall performance. However, we did have a positive effect from titanium white. To some extent, the market environment, the business environment helped us in that respect. But overall, we can see that the EBITDA in that area was 9 times higher year on year, which is a significant increase. In terms of the major determinants, major factors and contributors to our performance, I would like to mention that we had much lower unit costs, which was also due to our measures in the procurement area. The costs of procurement and purchases, the cost of repairs, and also the use of the integrated purchasing platform, as well as certain measures taken to secure our supplies of feedstocks. For instance, the agreement we signed with a Moroccan supplier of phosphate rocks. So all those measures resulted in significantly lower costs, unit costs of our business. In terms of individual segments, I would like to draw your attention especially to the pigments segment, in which our performance was very good. This segment used to fare very bad in previous periods, and it was even considered for closure. However, in this quarter, we can say that the contribution of this particular segment is positive. In a nutshell, our financial situation year on year was presented on the next slide. The main contributors were one-off impairment losses. I would like to draw your attention to our ratios excluding those one-offs. Both profitability for EBIT and EBITDA remain on a safe level, and other ratios are either flat or slightly higher in comparison with the last year, the previous year. In terms of liquidity, we have a stable situation at Police, at Grupa Azoty Police as well, which makes us optimistic in terms of our outlook for the future, especially in terms of our flagship investment, which is the PDH unit. Thank you very much for your attention. I will give the floor over to the next speaker. I will discuss the financial situation in the first quarter at Grupa Azoty Zakłady Azotowe Kędzierzyn. In the first quarter of 2017, our revenue from sales was at 475 million PLN, which is 10% higher year on year, and which is higher in the first quarter of any previous year in our history, looking better to the past. In all our segments, we reported higher revenues from sale. In terms of EBITDA, our company generated 81 million PLN in EBITDA, with EBITDA margin at 16.6%. At the level of net profit, our performance was at 41 million PLN, and the profitability at net margin at 9.1%. In terms of individual segments of our business, our major contributor is the fertilizer segment. In the first quarter, especially because the contribution of that segment was at 150. The second major segment is our oxo alcohols, in other words, chemicals and additives to PVC production, and the contribution was at 41%. In terms of our revenue, the fertilizer segment in the fertilizer segment, the result was slightly lower year on year at 241 million PLN compared to 251 PLN in 2016, the quarter one 2016. In terms of volume, however, we are observing continuous improvement and increase. However, the competition in this market required a certain correction of our prices. Therefore, this had a slight negative impact on our revenues. In terms of EBITDA in fertilizers, the EBITDA was at 54 million PLN, with the EBITDA profitability at 21%, which is lower year on year. And this is due mainly to one major factor: an increase in the prices of our major feedstocks used in the production of fertilizers, and especially natural gas. The price of natural gas went up nearly 30% year on year. In terms of our oxo plasticizers segment, we reported high revenues by value from 158 million to 210 million in this year. And also an even higher increase in terms of revenues by value. The EBITDA level in Q1 was at 13 million PLN, which was flat year on year, more or less flat, and EBITDA margin at 5.9% in the context of a very challenging situation in terms of our feedstock, propylene, the price of which went up. And at the same time, we had certain limitations in the accessibility of those feedstock. However, we had a record-breaking EBITDA in the chemicals segment in March, in the month of March, at 8.4%. In terms of our financial standing is very stable and we are on the safe side, or even exemplary, so to speak. You can see that all our financial ratios and these ratios show very clearly that our financial situation is stable. In terms of investments, in Q1, our investments accounted for 36 million PLN, including repairs and maintenance costs. Thank you very much for your attention, and we will now have a summary from the President of the Management Board. Thank you very much. You will obviously receive this information in detail, and you have received certain information before the presentation, before a conference. Of this information, from the perspective of our group as a whole and also our subsidiaries and individually, the most important thing I'd like to mention that we have implemented and completed a number of major measures, and this all contributed to our good performance in this very challenging market situation, because you know that our company, as any company, does not survive, does not act in a void, so to speak. We are very dependent on the measures taken by our competitors on the market. I would like to remind you of that, because it oftentimes happens that we are analyzed and we are evaluated as if we acted on the market by our own. We are not. You should also remember that you should compare us to our competitors. You should compare our situation, our performance, to that of our competitors. And you will see that our competitors are also vulnerable and sensitive to the effects of the downturns. Our performance, compared to theirs, are satisfactory. And there are a proof that the measures that we are taking are not only necessary, but also successful. Therefore, in terms of our key events in the last period, we will continue those measures in coming months as well. These are our priority tasks, including anything related to further consolidation, unification and standardization of the corporate rules and corporate regulations. Maybe on a funny note, as a joke, I'd like to tell you that in order to perform very well within such a large business entity as Grupa Azoty, as a group, you should always remember about the ethics, the business negotiations, and also the policy in terms of purchasing. There's also a question of the entire structure, internal structure in terms of our integration of sales and the trade in terms of the sales of fertilizers. As I have mentioned, the decision taken by the group's council are now being followed on by the director of this unit, Mr. Zarosiński, who is a person with an extensive and in-depth knowledge and experience in that very segment, in the fertilizer segment. We need to make sure that our individual companies do not stand out in terms of the number of individual amount of contracts. We need to make sure that the partner is Grupa Azoty group as a whole. We need to have a one single framework contract for the entire group to make sure that the structure is well organized. In terms of our consolidation, we will obviously need to have corporate uniform sources of procurement. There's always a certain ambition and certain emotions that come into play in that respect. You know that all individual companies within a group are, in a way, consumers and competitors. Ammonia is a good example of that. Poławy, Kędzierzy, Tarnów, and Police, they all produce ammonia. The question is now to coordinate their sales, to make sure that those solutions, that this entire structure is equally satisfactory to all of us, to all those companies. We need to have a joint commercial policy. This is something Mr. Zasadzki has mentioned already. He has mentioned the rules and the principles that are necessary for us to make sure that we act together, that we cooperate, that we act in unison to perform well. There's also a question of the review of certain foreign investments. It is another task for us. We need to analyze and complete that review of our foreign investments and take final decisions in that respect. There is a major challenge for us, and the major challenge, there's always a major challenge, and for us the major challenge is to have operational excellence strategy on a day-to-day basis. Azoty Pro, in my opinion, has exhausted its formula, and its effectiveness has now come to an end. It is difficult for us to repeat certain measures over and over again. So we need to make sure that we're not doing it, and we need to focus especially in efficiency improvements. This is an area that has still a lot of work to do. This is something that still raises our concern. We are striving to achieve cost optimization across all our business areas, across all our activities. Sometimes it does appear that the cost is minor. However, if you add all those small costs, you will see that their effect is quite major, is quite big. Obviously, we need to focus on the protection of our environment as well. On the one hand, we have certain legislative regulations which impose certain measures on us. However, on the other hand, we need to be focusing on it on our own initiative. We need to make sure that all our units, our installations perform very safely in terms of the environment and in terms of the safety, health and safety of our employees as well. This is a major challenge and a major project for us in terms of the integration and in the context of the integration of the group. We have a number of companies and a number of units in individual companies who act independently in terms of supervision, in terms of maintenance, in terms of repairs. We want to coordinate all those measures to make sure that we have certain tangible effects of those synergies. With this all, we have come to the conclusion that we need to focus on integration, diversification, and security and safety of the group. As a result, we decided to analyze our strategy, and we have analyzed and updated our strategy. We now need to follow on to make sure that this new, updated, revised strategy is effectively implemented. So It is not the question of words. Now it is time to take action so that we can meet at the next conference and tell you that we are successful in that area. We have taken a number of measures also in new technologies and corporate social responsibility. You can see it in more detail in our updated strategy document for 2013-2020. In terms of responsible business and so corporate social responsibility, we are always focusing on our internal relations, internal business partners, those and internal stakeholders. This is very important to us, and our partners at Police recommended us to the Responsible Employer Award. This is the award we received from the President of Poland, and for the past 3 years we have been given that title. Mr. Grant, the president of Grupa Azoty Kędzierzyn, is also here with us, and they also received certain awards. In terms of the employee relations, we are very focused on it to improve our relations with our internal stakeholders. My colleagues, such as Leszek Jakubow, CFO at Kędzierzyn, mentioned that propylene is a certain issue. There were certain problems with accessibility and the price of propylene, and this is the best proof and sign that our PDH project makes sense and that it is of key importance for the group in a number of levels and in a number of ways in the context of the interrupted supply of propylene. I'll now ask Mr. Adam Żurek to present the updated strategy in a nutshell for the period 2013-2020 and the work on the revision, the work on the new strategy from 2020 on is also in progress. This is something I'd like to mention as well. Thank you very much for this introduction. I'm very glad to be here to present the revised strategy of Grupa Azoty for 2013-2020. Let us first of all start where we are today. Maybe as a reminder, we are #1 in Europe in terms of fertilizers, in terms of oxo products, plasticizers, plastics, melamine, and titanium white. However, we are also #1 in another segment, which is specialist, low tonnage, high margin products. This is the very first time in Grupa Azoty Group to be #1 player in this particular market. At the beginning, the contribution to our revenues and EBITDA of that particular segment will be low. However, this segment will be rising in importance as time goes by, and it will have a major contribution to our and a major effect on our financial ratios. In terms of the strategy, in terms of the mission of our strategy, our mission is to produce safe and useful chemicals based on innovative technologies. Our vision, on the other hand, specifies that those products will be state-of-the-art and end-to-end comprehensive products that will meet the expectations of our customers halfway. Our strategy needed to be revised. Why? The main reasons were the fact that the macroeconomic situation has changed, that the market has changed, but also what has changed was the change of the profile of our major investments. We have dropped the CHP plant at Puławy, and also the gasification of coal project was also put on hold. The coke gas project was also a project that was dropped. We needed to revise our situation. The PDH project was already in existence. However, we had certain other projects that came up in the last year. We needed to revise our strategy because of that. We will focus on further consolidation of the capital group. We need to strengthen and reinforce our position in the fertilizers market. We need to reinforce our second pillar through certain investments, such as PDH or, for instance, the low tonnage specialty projects I have mentioned. And this all will make it possible for us to leverage the benefits of our business. In terms of our strategy and consolidation, in the area of consolidation, I will not repeat what my colleagues have said before, but we need to consolidate the logistics area, planning, and sales and procurement, obviously. We need to strengthen our leading position in terms of as a supplier of products to farmers. First of all, we need to remember about the efficiency of production, but on the other hand, we need to also remember about new projects and new solutions. We need to introduce certain new services, not only products, but also services to our product portfolio, which we offer to the farmers. In terms of strengthening of our second operating pillar, petrochemicals or PDH, as we have mentioned before, but we need to also develop the plastics segment by continuing the integration process, replacement of caprolactam with polyamide, for instance, the further processing of polyamide into more specialized compound projects, master batch, and so on. In terms of innovation, we need to use our potential to create and to generate new specialty products. As you have heard, already, we have a graphene project at Tarnów. We are also looking at certain other measures in terms of starters, for instance, in terms of our cooperation with research and development research centers and science centers and academic centers as well. In terms of our product strategy for agro-fertilizers, we need to focus on new formulas, such as intelligent fertilizers, such as the encapsulating of our products, of our fertilizers, so that the application is postponed and delayed as time goes by. This also has an effect of reducing our losses. Another question is more biodegradable products and maybe certain mergers and acquisitions if certain opportunities arise. This is something not entirely out of the question also in terms of fertilizers. In the area of plastics, we need to extend our product chain. We need to look for new solutions in terms of compounding, such as polymeric additives. In oxo alcohols and plasticizers, we need to move away from phthalate plasticizers to non-phthalate specialist plasticizers based on organic products. We need to extend our production line based on aldehyde as well. And in the area of titanium white, our work will focus on cutting the cost of production and moving towards the product version for plastics and also the possible application of titanium white in master batches. In melamine, we need to focus on reducing the costs and also removal of bottlenecks in production. In the energy segment, we will further the consolidation process. The main role of the energy segment is complementary to our major business in terms of the supply of electricity and heat. This is not the target product for the market. This is for internal in-house use. In terms of logistics, we need to first of all introduce the integrated IT system to make sure that our logistics is under better control across the group. And we need to optimize our logistics processes and make use of our seaside locations, for instance, in Gdańsk, but also internal waterways in Atboice. In terms of asset management, we need to remember that we need to have an integrated, unified management of our assets, especially in terms of urea, which we have mentioned before. We will also optimize the costs of management for production lines and servicing and maintenance as well, especially for certain highly sensitive units and machines, plant and machinery, in order to reduce costs by having repairs and failure rates under control. We need to also simplify and unify our IT processes. We need to introduce certain tools and procedures to make sure that our investment or, for instance, R&D projects are integrated and at the group level. In terms of feedstocks and natural gas, we need to have diversified sources, especially for natural gas, but also stability in terms of the sources of supplies for all other raw materials and feedstocks. And as far as our innovation strategy is concerned, the first level of innovation is the highest level, namely a group level, which concerns the most important investments. In that sense, innovation is the procurement or the access of well-tested, state-of-the-art products and technologies such as PDH or coal gasification. These are the solutions that are world-class solutions. The second level is our cooperation within the country, such as existing cooperation with academic centers or institutes and scientific units. For low tonnage products, we need to emphasize that we are betting on startups and we are counting on good startups. We have a number of such projects, a number of agreements in the pipeline. For instance, a project based on the analysis of satellite images, based on which the farmer receives information on how much and when, how much fertilizer should be applied and when. We are also very close to have a major agreement with another high-tech company in that area, a company which is able to perform very fast analysis of pathogens, with the use of which the farmer will know within a couple of hours which pathogen had affected their crops. So as I said, we are very close to that agreement. We are discussing and negotiating with other startups as well. For instance, technologies related to new materials for compounding and also analysis both in terms of industrial solutions and agriculture. Obviously, traditional ways and means are not something we will drop. We are still involved in InnoChem, or innovation chemistry, or innovation biology projects, and our participation is still in progress in that area as well. We are planning to introduce the integrated IT platform. This is another level we need to focus on. This is the platform that we will use to have good cooperation within the group and comparison of the situation in terms of IT within the group to maximize our efforts and to drive our costs down. And also, last but not least, the operational excellence strategy. The formula that was used before, Azoty Pro, has come to an end. It has been successful to a certain extent, however, it is not effective anymore. We need to have another operational excellence strategy, which we will be working on. In terms of our financial strategy, the dividend payout ratio at 60%, the lower is the high level. The low level, the low limit was dropped. This was due to a change in the economic cycle, and because we need to be more on the safe side in terms of our financials, because we had major capex projects, investment projects going on. Our margins went down from the margin went down. It was changed from 12 to 14%. Our financial strategy is based, on the one hand, on the integration of our strategic functions. On the other hand, we need to unify our financial muscles, so to speak, financial departments, and also we need to remember about the unification of our IT systems and processes. In terms of our corporate management strategy, we need to focus more on the management by segment. In addition, we have a separate shared services center for the entire group, and also we have certain number of non-core companies. However, their rules of business will be reviewed and their potential will be analyzed so as to enable us to take decisions whether or not keep those companies, non-core companies, or divest them. Consolidation of trade was another area, but this has been discussed before. Consolidation of procurement as well, it was discussed as well. And corporate social responsibility, this is something we are focusing on. This is something of key importance, most of all on the protection of our environment, but also safety of our plant and machinery, and also good cooperation, a good rapport with our stakeholders, especially local communities. And obviously, we need to improve the qualifications and competencies of our workforce. That will be all from me. And now we will have a summary by Mr. Wojciech Wardacki, President of the Management Board. Ladies and gentlemen, we could take a long time to discuss all those projects and all those measures we are taking in order to improve our efficiency, in order to reinforce and enlarge our market share. However, I need to focus on one matter specifically. This was touched upon already by Mr. Wojciech Wardacki, and this is the question of one-off events. You need to remember that we need to compare our performance to 2014 and 15, for instance, but we need to also remember to compare our performance with that of our competitors. I would like to draw your attention that the 2014-15 data is now outdated. This data, this information, this performance was, so to speak, pumped up. And the opinion of the auditor is quite clear. And the opinion will tell you what kind of data should be included in, what kind of disclosures should be presented in 2014 and 15. The value of investment at Police in the individual financial statements was artificially increased. The same applies to the value of inventories and the value of receivables. The same applies to net profit for 2014 and 15 by as much as 82 million PLN. The value, the amount of retained profit was also too high. At Grupa Azoty Police, in the consolidated financial statement for 2015, the value of fixed assets was too high as well, by 280 million PLN. The same goes for retained profits. Equity, shareholders' equity, as well as net profit, which was presented at a higher level than actual. This needed to be remembered. This is something you need to bear in mind, because we are often compared, our current performance is often compared to our performance back in 2014 and 15. However, the chartered auditors were quite clear and that those values were over the top and needed adjustment. Those financial statements have to be adjusted, and you need to remember about that. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you for your attendance and patience. Also to our webcast viewers who are listening or watching us live. I would like Grupa Azoty to be able to communicate only good messages and signals to you. However, you need to believe me, if there's anything wrong with our operations, if there's anything wrong in terms of our outlook, we will also tell you that. We'll also communicate that message to you in a very objective and clear fashion. Thank you very much for your attention.